Hey everyone. This time we read A Casual Revolution by Jesper Juul. So this book was pretty interesting. It covers the history of casual games and kind of how they rose to prominence, sort of the expansion of the genre, that sort of thing. And it also talks quite a bit about the Wii, which is kind of cool. I read one book earlier which was talking about the development of the Xbox 360 and the PS3. So yeah, now we get to talk about puzzle games and motion controls on the Wii for a little bit. So I do want to say this book got outdated pretty damn quick. It was published in 2010, and a lot of the research was done from '06 to '08, from what I can tell. And he kind of missed the whole, smartphones coming to prominence and tablets and that sort of thing, and the shift of casual games to more of like the handheld and the smartphones and tablets, that kind of stuff. So a lot of what he's talking about in here didn't really last that long, or happen to be a fad or something like that. I think one of the big things is he starts talking about Bejeweled and a lot of the other Match 3 games. And he, unfortunately, I think he missed out on Candy Crush because that just kind of wiped Bejeweled out. He also he does like this brief history on puzzle games and that sort of thing, and he leaves quite a bit out. I get why, but there's a lot of stuff that happened that kind of showed that puzzle games were fun. They could be really great and everything. They were on a lot of handheld consoles, and he sort of ignores that to some extent. It is talked about, but it's kind of weird the way he goes about doing it. Yeah, he's really focusing on the 2000s here, and doesn't really go into how you had puzzle games in the 90s and in the 80s as well. It was just one of those strange things where I looked at it and I said, well, what about X, Y, and Z? And he doesn't really talk about some other stuff. It was, I don't know, it was one of those cases of me, like in hindsight, looking at what happened and and having like a more of a historical view over this, and that not really matching up with a book that was published 10, 12 years ago. That was one of the cases where I kind of needed to take a step back and go, why am I pointing out all of this stuff which really isn't relevant to the book? It's kind of getting back on track here. We spend a lot of time talking about the Wii and also Rock Band and Guitar Hero and the games that have controllers that sort of mimic like what you would actually do in real life, at least as best they could with that kind of stuff. And the reason that stuff is brought up is because Jesper points out these are controllers and these are games that people can, they can do in real life. So they see a guitar controller and they go, okay, I kind of know how I'm supposed to hold this. It doesn't have that many buttons on it. I can get this down. Or you look at a Dance Dance Revolution pad and you go, okay, it's just four buttons that I have to press and I'm standing on it, so I'm mimicking dancing in some way. So there are things that you can do to sort of say, hey, casual players, you don't need to use this, controller setup, which might be a bit intimidating for you. And even with that, I think he's kind of off base a bit. At that time, and when he was writing this, the controller schemes for the PlayStation and for the Xbox, they really hadn't changed much, especially with the Xbox, because they only had one console generation to go back to. With PlayStation, they had two, but if you look at those controllers, the button positions haven't really changed. They maybe added some analog sticks to it from the original PlayStation controller, but those setups haven't changed, even at this point in 15 years. It was kind of weird. It's really just Nintendo that keeps screwing around with their button layout and whatnot. And with the Wii, they obviously simplified it, but made it look like an NES controller if you turned it to the side. So, yeah, it was... That's one argument that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. where you show somebody, hey, this is a 16 button controller. It's really not that hard to pick up, especially now with, I'm doing it again, but especially now with the way tutorials are laid out. They kind of explain what you need to do. So I will say this, with the motion controls on the Wii, the reason why they were, why people liked it, why people bought the system, the controls were actually pretty good with the motion controller if you calibrated it correctly. And that's part of the reason why the system was successful. It wasn't necessarily because the games were simple, it was because the games were fun. And that's kind of why the home console became, as successful as it was. I don't really get some of the other stuff that he mentions in here because it was just kind of a fad. Guitar Hero didn't last that long, and it got gobbled up by Rock Band, and Rock Band didn't last that long, and people kind of moved away from it. Even the Wii, people moved away from that too. I mean, you can still find them floating around in people's houses, but people didn't really stick with them because all of that kind of got replaced by something a little bit easier, and that was your smartphone. Everyone had smartphones, and they just kind of played simple games on those. They don't necessarily need a console to use them. I think when he got into talking about puzzle games, that was the part that really got me a little bit more interested with this. I thought a lot of the stuff in here was kind of cool and fun to read about, and some of it felt a little bit like a time capsule. But when he started talking about puzzle games, I was like, okay, this makes sense. These are still around. They are just very... a lot of the mechanics are very recycled at this point. He talks about how Bejeweled became popular, how it got cloned to hell and back. And then he talks a little bit about a game called Puzzle Quest, and how people, like the casual players, didn't really understand it because it was combining a puzzle game with an RPG, and that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to people. I had never heard of Puzzle Quest before, but the way he describes it, it sounds like every goddamn Match 3 game that you can find on your phone now, where you'll have, like with WWE champions, you line up your gems, you get like a Match 3, Match 4, whatever, and then your wrestler will do a move or something like that. Or, or with like an RPG, a puzzle RPG, where you're fighting enemies and you need to do the whole Bejeweled thing to increase your attacks and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it sounds a bit like puzzle battlers and that kind of thing. Something like Tetris Attack or Kirby's Avalanche or Tetris 99, that kind of stuff. And yeah, that stuff's still around, it's still going strong, and I don't think it's really going to go away. But all of that stuff moved from like an actual a dedicated handheld to being on your phone. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just... you can see why this was kind of hard for me to go, yes, you're right, Jesper, but what you're saying isn't going to happen, and it's going to move in a different direction. So many times reading this, I kept thinking, yes, you're correct, but... The last thing I want to talk about is when Jesper starts getting into casual players playing a hardcore game and hardcore gamers playing a casual game. But I just found that section very interesting, where he talks about, you'll have a casual game like Dance Dance Revolution, and you'll have somebody who just practices it for hours upon hours, and they get really, really good at it. And then you'll have somebody who just maybe pops in a quarter, or however many quarters it takes to play DDR, and they'll play it for however long they want to, have their fun, move on with their day. It's just that weird disconnect between some players where some people think, you have to practice to become just the best at this game. And others, it's like, well, I just want to play it and have my fun and move on. You'll see something like that with From Software games, whenever those get released. You see some people say, well, this needs a difficulty setting, and then you'll see or they'll say this is a hard game, and you'll see the people who spend like most of their lives playing From Software games, and they're saying it's not hard, you just suck at it, and you need to get good. But the person who's playing it casually doesn't care about that. They just want to play and have their fun. I don't think that the From Software games don't need a difficulty option. It's just one of those games. If you want to play it, play it. If you enjoy it and want to keep playing it, keep going. If you don't like it, move on. It's not that big of a deal. This book did get me thinking quite a bit while I was reading it, and that's what a good book should do. Just give you some ideas and make you think about something in a different way. This kind of did that in some cases, and in other cases it was just sort of, well, that didn't happen. So, yeah, there was a lot of great stuff in this book. I really like just how Jesper lays out a lot of this stuff. Even if I don't agree with him on everything, I think it's really interesting to just read through what somebody else thinks about casual games. So anyway, guys, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys. And if you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. Anyway, have a great day, everybody. Bye.